It's now officially been 1 week since Worldwide Developers Conference unfolded, and still, we're making dedicated videos about all the things they've announced. That gives you the gravity of how densely packed this event was. But it's been 1 week now of me using iOS 13 on my daily driver, the iPhone XS Max, and I'll be giving you sort of my in-depth opinion and in-depth experience with what I've noticed so far in iOS 13. So let's begin, and then maybe after this video we can start talking about subjects that aren't analyzing in-depth what happened at last week's event. And probably don't expect a tvOS video because it's so minor and small that I don't really want to go through the effort of putting a developer beta on my Apple TV, no matter how simple or easy it may be. Let's finally end this coverage of Worldwide Developers Conference with today's video. So let's begin. First thing I want to highlight with iOS 13 is the performance boosting, and that mainly comes with apps that are optimized for iOS 13, which means they will open twice as fast. I can say I noticed that a little bit when using the first-party apps. Obviously, third-party apps are not supported with the new iOS 13 developer beta, but they will, of course, over time as the public beta rolls out and the official release in the fall. But what's way more noticeable is, I think, the Face ID improvements that they talked about at the event. I'm confident to say that they actually are noticeable. Face ID got a 30% speed improvement just over software, which is excellent. Now, you're not going to notice it that much when simply unlocking the phone, because I think Face ID as a sensor is not really that slow. The only thing that's slow about unlocking an iPhone is Apple wants to make sure there's a very consistent and very reliable experience of looking at your notifications and then the lock on the front opening and then swiping up to get to your apps, and they want a very clean, smooth animation when all that happens. Apple's not like OnePlus where they want everything to be as snappy and just jump to the home screen as quick as possible. Though I do agree it would be nice to have that as an option, like something in the settings that would allow you to bypass the lock screen if there's no notifications and just immediately jump to the home screen. But personally, even if it was there, I don't think I'd use it. I kind of like the smoothness of iOS unlocking. However, the situations where you will notice Face ID being faster is when you unlock them within third-party apps, whether it be banking apps or mobile payment apps, or perhaps you're just trying to access different passwords for iCloud keychain. I use those a ton, so noticing that Face ID is being activated, and before it used to require a little bit of an animation, now it simply jumps directly to being unlocked, and yeah, I can say it is noticeably faster. The next big noticeable change that I'm finally glad Apple has addressed is the volume indicator has been moved, and personally, I just want to add, I think it's the most intuitive, best volume indicator I've ever used on any device. It's very, very simple. Now, when changing the volume, you just have this little slide over menu pop out from where your volume buttons are, and instead of, like you have on Android, having a little button with a slider on it that you have to grab and then adjust, there really isn't much of a button to grab onto with the touchscreen. You kind of just gesture on that part of the display and it will go up or down, which means if you're listening to something and it's really, really loud, instead of having to hold down on the volume key, now you can just press it once and then with your finger drag it down all the way to mute, which is way faster than ever before. And also vice versa. If you're listening to something and you can't hear anything, you're able to click up on the volume, swipe up, and get it to full blast quicker than you ever could before. While at the same time not being intrusive, it's still very, very intuitive and gives you way more options than you had before. The only depressing part about this is even though we've got the redesigned volume indicator on both the iPad and the iPhone, we didn't get any redesigned volume indicator on the macOS Catalina update. So that kind of sucks, though I guess it is a much smaller portion of the display. So it's not as bad as before, but still very happy with how Apple handled the volume indicator this year. Then comes to the Photos app. This was a redesign I was really not expecting, but I can confidently say I really enjoy it. Being able to swipe and browse between massive amounts of time like you haven't been able to before has been really nice. I like the way they lay out all your pictures and can even have live photos play as you're browsing through your library. Plus, one thing I like that they added is now when you open a video in the Photos app, it will automatically start playing. You don't have to tap it and then hit play again. And there's a ton of little changes like that that you'll notice throughout the iOS 13 beta, which I'm not gonna have time in today's video to go over every little thing, but probably really, really tiny details that many people won't even notice. Like, for instance, when your phone turns on for the first time, instead of having the bars for your cellular connection be completely flat, they now have a little buffering animation that you can see, knowing that your phone is searching for a new cellular connection. It's not just completely off. Tiny differences like that you'll notice in day-to-day. Obviously, a much bigger difference you'll notice on day-to-day is dark mode, which I am more than happy with how Apple has handled it. They found a way to make dark mode, still very, very friendly to the eyes, but kind of a combination of true black, you know, OLED smartphone dark mode alongside the darker grays, so that you still have this color combination, or shade combination, I should really say, when you're using different apps, so that it's not just all completely black, as I saw a lot of jailbreak tweaks that turned off literally as many pixels as they could, and I thought it looked a little weird, but Apple found a happy middle ground between the two of them so that it's much easier on the eyes while still looking fairly modern and slick. The only distracting part now is when there's third-party apps that don't have a dark mode, because once you turn on dark mode with iOS 13, you're gonna have a hard time wanting to turn it off, but yes, you can have it cycle throughout the day so that it turns off in the mornings when the sun comes up and it turns back on when the sun goes down. But then as soon as you open an app like Instagram and there's no dark mode, everything becomes extremely blinding because you're used to the entire user interface being all dark and very little light projected at your eyes as possible. I'm leaving it on right now just because I think it looks good and I prefer it, but yeah, as I predicted in previous videos, it's exactly what we expected. Once it's there, you get used to it very quickly, and I'm already over it, and I take it for granted that it's built into the user interface now, and I've only used iOS 13 for a week. So if you haven't got iOS 13 yet, once you get it, you'll notice it, you'll be happy with it, and then a couple days go by and you don't even notice it anymore. The other slight redesign I'm very happy with is the Apple Music app. I think they've redesigned the Now Playing tab to be way more intuitive than before, plus the in real-time lyrics option is the best. Now, I know that other subscription or other music services out there have had this option of the lyrics adjusting depending on when you're listening to the song, but I just think iOS 13's user interface is the most pretty and the most optimized of any of those apps I've ever seen out there that have the lyrics that move with the soundtrack. I think theirs just looks the most creative and looks the most elegant out of all the different apps out there that are capable of doing it. Apple got it right, and I'm very happy with all the changes they brought to the music app. Now, Reminders got redesigned as well, but I actually don't use the Reminders app that much. There's not really a need in my life to. Usually I just set alarms. So I'm glad that they finally redesigned it because it has not changed in a long, long time. But on top of that, I wasn't really looking for anything that drastic. And I talked about this in my iPad OS video already, but the Apple Maps update is really, really cool. I wish the look around feature was available in way more places, because compared to browsing around on Street View with Google Maps, look around, as they call it, with Apple Maps is way more immersive and way more believable when it comes to navigating around a 3D space and the way the camera views change depending on what restaurant you point at and stuff like that. It's just beautifully designed, and it's the classic example of Apple waiting until they can do something right instead of doing something first. So this is another example of that. They wanted to wait until they had accurate LiDAR measured 3D mapping technology before they integrate that kind of look around feature into Apple Maps. Of course, the downside being, though, it's not available in that many places, but I'm sure they're working on trying to bring it to as many places as possible. They're just not there yet. It probably takes a lot more time to design and equip cities to have that look around feature. One leak that ended up being real is being able to set your profile picture within iMessage, which I'm a huge fan of, because now it's going to be easier than ever once everyone starts installing iOS 13 to set their profile picture before anyone even sends a text to you. So luckily this is customizable so that you have to enable it. If an unknown number texts you, you can tell iOS if you want that unknown number to have access to the profile picture, or you can set it to just be contacts only, so your profile picture will update for all of your contacts but no unknown numbers or spam calls for those YouTubers or celebrities that were worried if someone would find their phone number and see the profile picture and be like, oh, I found this YouTuber's phone number. Luckily they made that customizable, so I'm happy with it. And the friends I have that are already running iOS 13, they set their iMessage profile picture, and then a little pop-up shows up in iMessage that basically just says, do you want to update this person's profile picture to the one they set for themselves? And you can say yes or no if they decided one that you don't like. If you want to have your own profile picture for all of your different friends and you don't want their advice, they give you that control as well. I'm also impressed with Apple's doubling down on security and privacy this year, now with so many different apps popping up saying, by the way, this is where this app has been tracking your location, which in the past, a lot of us didn't know about. All we knew was they were using your location in the background, and maybe they were just using it so they would know that you're near Panera Bread or something like that. But now that that data is openly presented to the user, third parties are going to have a lot harder time getting away with tracking users' location data, because all of that stuff is being upfront presented to the user, which is great for privacy reasons and means that third parties, if you're tracking people's location in the background, you better be extra careful from here on out, because we're going to see that and it's going to show up, and those people who get those pop-ups are likely going to present it to you on Twitter and be like, hey, what the heck? What are you doing? Why does Panera Bread need to know where I am every 5 minutes? Extending with that, this is a feature I'm very excited for, but there's not a ton of apps utilizing it right now. It's called Login with Apple, which they talked about during the event, but essentially it's going to be replacing, in fact, for a lot of third parties, requiring apps that need your email or need a password, typically that are asking you to log in with Google or log in with Facebook, both of which are known for tracking user data and collecting your third-party information of what services and what apps you're using. Apple's going to be scrapping that option for third parties and replacing it with login with Apple, and luckily Apple does not sell your data. Apple's not interested in that, so they are able to encrypt it and give those third parties your email if you want them to, or a custom-made non-email that's not even yours, just so that that company, that third party that needs to send you newsletters or whatever, they'll have a dummy email to send that stuff and newsletter updates to if you're not interested in getting emails from them. So having login with Apple is going to save so much spam in our inboxes and also make things way more secure, and I think Facebook and Google are going to be in trouble if they rely heavily on iOS users using those login with Google Facebook features in the past, because I know a lot of us do. I definitely did. I could think of 5 to 6 apps off the top of my head that I definitely used those login quick features because they're convenient, but also they would end up sending a ton of stuff to my email, plus they're harvesting my data to use to their benefit. So knowing that Apple's stepping in there and saying, you know what, we don't need that anymore, Google, Facebook, you're gonna have to go track data elsewhere. Very happy Apple is moving forward with that update, and I can't wait to see how many third parties are going to have to switch to it later. The other change with iOS 13 I'm very impressed by is the Find My app, where they're treating all of Apple's products basically as tile trackers, which for those of you who don't know, a tile tracker will let you know where your keys or whatever you want to slap a tile tracker onto, it will let you know where it is based on being linked via Bluetooth to your phone. However, if a tile is lost and it is out of range of internet or out of range of Bluetooth, then it will ping other tile trackers out there so that if it's detected by another tile, then it will notify you where that tile was last detected. So you can get a general idea of where your keys or where your wallet or where your laptop is. Apple's bringing that technology basically to all of their products. So now, even if you lost your MacBook and it was in a place without Wi-Fi, it will encryptedly, so not letting other people know the location, and securely ping all other Apple products in the area who may have an LTE connection or may have a Wi-Fi connection, so that you'll get a ping where your MacBook was last detected via using this now huge, expansive Apple network, because Apple iOS devices and macOS devices are all over the place now, particularly if you're in a city. So acquiring your device if you lost it is going to be even easier now than before, and I'm very happy they're incorporating this technology. Plus, there's some leaked code within iOS 13 that suggests Apple may be working on their own custom Apple tile that will work in conjunction with the Find My app, that maybe down the road they'll launch these little tiles that you could attach to things that aren't iOS devices. Maybe your keys, maybe your wallet if you have a separate one and you don't want to use the built-in wallet app on iOS, which I know a lot of us need our IDs, our licenses, or cash on there. So being able to attach these tiles to other things within our daily life will make losing things much, much harder. Plus those tiles will act as another beacon to ping to in case someone loses their MacBook or their iPad and it happens to not have a Wi-Fi connection. Another feature I'm utilizing more and more with iOS 13 is actually the swipe keyboard. This is something that I used to use on my iPhone back when they launched third-party keyboards. I used to use Gboard for swipe because I thought it was kind of cool, and Gboard wasn't trying to be an Android keyboard. It was trying to emulate the iOS keyboard, except give the iPhone experience some more features that it didn't have before. But then I started running into all kinds of bugs with Gboard. It was crashing, and overall it was just a very unreliable experience, so I stopped using it and went back to the default iOS keyboard just because it was reliable and it was simple. It wasn't anything fancy, didn't have any cool features, but it worked. But now that they've added swipe back to iOS 13, I'm actually getting comfortable with using it again, and now I'm finding myself use it as much as possible. So I'm very happy they've finally added swipe to the default iOS keyboard, which you don't have to use, but if you're just hoping to swipe around the keyboard for some quick words and want to text a little bit faster with one finger, swipe is a great way to do it. And there's still, of course, a few things I wish they could have added with iOS 13. There's still no way to change the camera, video resolutions, and frame rate within the camera app. I've been asking for this for years, but at the same time, I agree that's not something most of us need to change very regularly. That's something we change occasionally, which means that it's really not out of our way to go into the settings app and change the recording and frame rate in there, but it would kind of make a little bit more sense if they could have just added it to the camera app, maybe as a long press option on the top where you can see the frame rate and resolution. But there's even some features hidden within iOS 13 that Apple's not even utilizing yet. Like, there's now the option to record video or take pictures with the front-facing and rear-facing camera at the same time. Now, the iOS camera app doesn't have this as a feature, but previously, if third-party camera apps wanted to record video with the rear or front-facing simultaneously, they weren't able to. Apple locked them out of doing that. Now, with iOS 13, they have enabled that, so it's only a matter of time before some third-party camera apps are able to utilize using rear and front-facing simultaneously. As we've talked about, 3D Touch is still technically there in iOS 13, but to me, it's obvious they're trying to rule it out. They're trying to push it away and get you used to not having it. There's so many instances like peek and pop or long pressing on certain things that used to not activate 3D Touch features that are now activating 3D Touch features. So clearly to me, the next generation iPhone is not going to have 3D Touch, but we made a whole video on that. I'm bummed, but I also kind of get it because we've been hearing these rumors for a long time. So if there was something negative I had to say about iOS 13, that would be it. However, as an update, I have to say this has been more than what I expected. It's amazing to me that iOS 13 was able to be a performance boosting upgrade while simultaneously being a stable one and also being an aesthetic upgrade where they changed the look and the feel of a lot of iOS between dark mode, between app redesigns, giving them way more features than they had before, way more practical, like the photo editing and the video editing options now built in with the Photos app. There's so much that you can do that you weren't able to do before. While at the same time, iOS 13's been incredibly stable for me. I don't know about the other people testing the betas, but from what I've heard, this has not been anywhere near the travesty that was iOS 11 with that bug fest and how crazy that was for everyone, that Apple had to take all of last year with iOS 12 just to make a stable, simple upgrade. I know a lot of you guys want redesigns, but you have to understand the whole reason there was that design scheme change from iOS 6 to 7 was mostly because Johnny Ive took over the software development team. They didn't update iOS simply because they were bored. Oh, it's looked the same for a long time, let's just change it. That's not why they update the look of things. I have the mentality of if it ain't broke, don't fix it, and I'm perfectly fine with the design scheme and the minimalistic style of iOS. I don't care if you get bored with it. The phone's job is not to entertain you with app icons. If you want to be entertained, go watch Telos of Gaming. We uploaded a dank edited gameplay video over there. I'm not making any money off of it, so don't act like this is selling out. I'm just saying there's other ways of entertainment than just updating the look of your phone, okay? Focus on other things. There's people who designate their careers to entertainment. iOS is more for optimization and functionality. For a beta 1, it's been incredibly stable. I'm very happy with it. There's definitely bugs. I would warn anyone who's thinking about installing the developer beta on their main device. I'm gonna say it's okay to do it just as long as you have a backup, whether that means backing up your phone to iCloud or your computer, or making sure that you have a secondary iPhone like an 8 Plus or a 6 Plus, heaven forbid, that you would have to switch to in case iOS 13 was too buggy and unreliable on your main device. So if anything, if you have an older phone that's compatible with iOS 13, put it on there to test out. Don't put it on your main device unless you have a secondary one. I put it on my XS Max because I wanted to take advantage of all the new OLED dark mode features and stuff like that. But worst case scenario, if something goes wrong and my XS Max becomes unusable, I can easily switch back to my product red iPhone 8 Plus. This is still running iOS 12, no betas on here. I have a backup plan, okay? But don't do it without one. That would be dangerous. And in fact, the most amount of bugs I get on this thing are mostly with third-party apps not being optimized. So Discord acts really weird, Instagram acts weird sometimes over photo editing apps. Really anything that accesses photos on here usually ends up crashing it, depending on what you're trying to bring up. I'm running into glitches and bugs, absolutely, but I think it's mostly because a lot of third-party apps haven't updated their apps for iOS 13 yet, given it's only been out for a week. So over time, I'm sure it will get more stable and better, and I would certainly recommend it once the public beta comes out, if you hear from other people that it's mostly stable. So I really appreciate you guys watching. Thank you for waiting for an entire week for me to make a dedicated video on my iOS 13 impressions, but I just figured so many YouTubers and other channels were talking about all the tiny little differences anyway. Still though, I decided to make this video because I just wanted to express my appreciation of operating system upgrades and let people know this is why we like using Apple products, because we know every single year we're gonna get big, massive performance and aesthetic upgrades for many, many years after we've purchased our product. So this is one of those awesome times for Apple users who are looking forward to refreshing their mobile operating system experience. This is your Apple Sheep here, and I will see you in the next one.